This podcast is part of the Deluxe Edition Network. To find other great shows on the network, head over to deluxeeditionnetwork.com. That's deluxeeditionnetwork.com.
What happens if not only a secret life is exposed, but what if it's also forced upon you?
What up, guys? Welcome to Crime Over Cocktails. I'm Tiffany, your host, and today I'm with my guest, Michelle.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for being here.
Mm-hmm.
So what had led you to Crime Over Cocktails?
Well, I mean, what a fabulous title that is, let's be honest. And then I read about what you were doing here, and I thought, what a great platform that I could be on your show to really open up people's eyes about what kind of crime over cocktails can actually happen, because there are quite a few. And unfortunately, I was a victim of that, and not loving that word, but I did experience some crime over cocktails. So I was, or what I thought, happily married for about 17 years. And then what happened was I experienced a tragedy of somebody very close to me had passed. And I came home to my ex-husband now, and I said, I really want to live life to its fullest. And I want to live it really for myself and for this person that I lost, because she always lived that way. And, you know, I didn't know what I didn't know at the time. And I didn't know that I was giving an entrance to somebody who wanted to take me into the lands of Alice in Wonderland and into a dark tunnel, and that he was already living in, but I had no idea about it. And what that entailed was lots of cocktails, drugs, alcohol, sexual deviance, and the sex trafficking of myself. And this is someone who I had devoted my life to. We made promises to our parents. We had 2 children at the time, special needs children, who I took care of. You know, I was very active in the schools, in the community, all of that. And I didn't know what was going on outside of my home. So when I told him that, I didn't know that I was giving not only validation, but permission to have me join his world, so to speak. And it was quite frightening. And it lasted for 6 years it was a very long time, until I literally went from the floor to the door and I got out. And that was only a few years ago. So I'm still processing it all and going through it. But I realize that I'm one of the lucky ones. And, you know, we have to be really aware of what goes on around us. So all of this happened, though, before really the internet and cell phones. Well, we met before then. And when things started happening, there was no social media, really. There was no TikTok for sure. There wasn't as much awareness. And, you know, I was groomed for it. You know, these are all, let's say, keywords that we all know of now that you see. There are hashtags, whatever it is. And I'm really happy about that, because as we had stated before, all of this, it's a long time coming. Like, it needed to happen. Those of us that have gone through hell and back again, we have a story to tell, and we have warnings for the younger generations. And we're now able to do it. And I thank you for that also. I thank you for having me here doing this.
Of course. It is. It's so important, because so many people think that they're alone. They're the only ones that are going through it.
Mm-hmm.
And that couldn't be further from the truth.
Right. And it really is very isolating. I mean, listen, I live in a community that, you know, I don't look like the face of someone who's been sex trafficked or even abuse. I didn't have bruises on me. I had them on my body, but you couldn't see them. I have, parts of me on the inside that are broken, not bones necessarily, but, things that I've had improved are no longer, good. I've got some things running through my body because of it in the form of silicone. And, it was very different. And when you have someone who's really smart about what they're doing and very strategic, there's a way to get away with it. There really is. But the most important thing that I didn't realize was all the years leading up to what happened, I really was being groomed for it. And I was made to be very dependent on him, and in every sense, financially, especially emotionally, physically, all of that. And so when people say, well, why didn't you leave? I didn't know there was an option. My family was alienated from me, or vice versa. The friends that I had that were in the community, that were in the schools, my mom friends, I didn't tell anyone anything. I protected him and what was going on because I was told to. And I was shamed and guilted even within our own bedroom. It was a really scary time because things were happening everywhere. And on the flip side of it, I was still the mom. So it was a double life I was living at the time.
How did he go from, I want to live life to the fullest, to I'm going to pimp you out?
That's a really great question. You're so funny. You laugh at it. And really I need to, because, I've been in really intense therapy even today. And it's so overwhelming for me to talk about and for people to listen to. The thing about it is he was doing stuff I didn't know about, but, and like I said, when I said that to him, it validated for him in his own head what he had been doing. So, here's a guy that went away for business and was getting massages, quote unquote, in his room. I mean, were they? We don't know. If they were, why in your room at 10 o'clock at night? Or there are plenty of websites where you could get someone else who's not your spouse to do things for you or with you. Well, now he's got me, so he doesn't have to pay for it necessarily. And it's, I'm going to watch this on a website. I'm going to have this fantasy, but now I'm going to try and make it my reality. And it escalated. And, it wasn't something that I wanted. It wasn't like, oh, let's do this. This will be fun. It was an assumption, and he just took advantage completely. And, I so badly wanted to please him because he was my husband and I loved him, and I could feel the attention switching. He was starting to take better care of himself, and I could see that he was getting the attention that he needed outside of the home. And so, my question at the time was, well, what do I have to do to keep my husband's attention on me? And that meant I changed my look a little bit. I dressed a little sexier. I live in an area where people do that anyway. And then there were groups of people that we were friends with, and it was a must. Like, there was no option except to look a certain way. Otherwise you weren't allowed in the door. And, there were drugs everywhere. And they were mostly by, this one person, and he had that in his left pocket and me in his right pocket. And so I didn't know that, but every time we went out, I didn't know that I was an option. It's really scary because when someone does something like that, they start off very small. Let's go out for a date night, honey. Okay, let's go for dinner and drinks. Okay, then let's go home and we'll be together. Okay, great. Then let's go for dinner, drinks, and dancing. And we'll stay out till 4 a.m. Okay, let's go for dinner, drinks, dancing, and we'll stay out till 6 a.m. But how do you stay out till 6 a.m? Here, take this. Come on, take it. Don't ruin the night. Come on, don't you want to have fun with me? Don't you want to connect with me? How much fun will this be? And it was in your face. And I don't know if anyone has been around drugs that you need to be close to. You can't get away with it. And the funny thing is, I would be the worst alcoholic or drug addict because I'm the type of person that would sneeze and things would go around, or I'd get sick. I mean, really bad. I mean, even my kids were when they were told the stories, they're like, we don't believe you because we know mom. She's just a klutz, and it just didn't go I wasn't raised like that. I didn't know from that. If I had too many drinks, I was on, in the ladies' room, like I was getting sick. Like I was really bad at the whole idea. Like he had this whole image of what it would be like, and I totally destroyed it. So, in some form, but it was really scary because it got to be, it leveled up every time we went out, and it was every weekend. And so my family would go to dinner together, and I wasn't allowed to go because that was our night, or yeah. And so I lost that connection with them even. And, there'd be pictures posted on social media and people made their own assumptions about what was happening, but they didn't know that I was suffering inside. They didn't know that. Because I would show up still. I would show up to the meetings. I would show up to my school meetings. My kids had a team full of doctors and teachers and tutors and advocates. And I ran that in addition to this other side, because that was really who I was. That was more important to me than anything, and still is. But I still, I wanted him to be with me and pay attention to me. And that's where the whole childhood wound that's not healed comes in. And he knew all of them. He knew everything. I mean, when you're together, for almost 20 years, you know everything about the other person. And that was exploited. It was exploited, just at dinner with somebody. It was exploited in a private, together, just the two of us, and then in a group of people. And I've always said that when you're dealing with somebody's childhood wounds and you target those, you're now talking to someone who's young and naive. And so when he would put me out there or place me, it was like I became this child that he was exploiting. And I always say I became like a circus animal. I was definitely a pawn in whatever games that were being played. And it wasn't the men and the women, and it wasn't just sex. It was just display. Like, look what I could do. Look what I could make her do. It was a power, control, shocking thing. And he would always say, I love putting you in uncomfortable situations. I know. And exactly.
I'd be like, excuse me.
Yeah. Well, I would definitely run now, but I wasn't that person. I mean, I was like in the thick, it was like quicksand, and it was all the way up. There was no way I could get out. And I thought ironically, I thought he was the only person that could get me out because I had nobody else around me. Nobody. And
well,
the people
did the grooming, he did the isolation.
All of it. And then the friends we were with, the gals were just as bad. I mean, the women knew how to do it too. Come sit with us, come sit with us at lunch. We all know that. We've seen the movie. We've played it out in our heads. Come be our friend. We've been friends for years. Oh, now we're going to let you in. And so, but, they have an agenda also. A lot of them had an agenda, or some of them had an agenda with, me and them, or me and their spouse, or me and whatever it is. And I didn't know that. I didn't know from that. I didn't come from that. I didn't understand it. And the situation was always set up, and to the point where no was not an option. At some point, like, the drinks were always made for me. And, when it's like there were two sides. Like, I could see my behavior changing. And there was that space of awareness. And then that's like, I could see it, but I couldn't stop it because there was stuff running through my body. That's really scary. I always throw Eckhart Tolle in there. Like, he says that, like, there's the person that you are and the person that witnessing who you are. And I couldn't get away from that because most of the time I had, chemicals running through my body that I couldn't control because, again, no was not an option. And when I started to push back, I would get the silent treatment for days. I would get the emotional abuse. And it was really scary. It was sad. And because here it was, I was trying to, raise a family, and our parents who were close would come over and I'd make brunch for everybody. And, I'd have to wake them up to sit down for brunch. And then it was like, okay, everyone has to go because we need to go out. And I'd be exhausted. I mean, if I slept 6 hours on the weekend, it was a good thing. That's a lot. And so I was exhausted, and it's like, that's another, that was like another step on the ladder of all of this that was going on. And then it got to be a point where it wasn't just in groups. There was a lot going on in my own bedroom. There was strangulation, to the point where I would be unconscious and he wouldn't stop what he was doing. There's, like a belt around my neck kind of thing. And, from behind, and then telling, let's say, the therapist, oh, she wanted that. Like, who would want that? I don't know anyone, even somebody who's into something like that. That's, that's life or death right there. And I don't know anyone that would really want any of that. And if you do, God bless you. Like, that's great. Just, it wasn't for me. And there need to be agreements. And there were none. There were no agreements. I was not a willing participant. And if I didn't fight back, it was because I didn't know how, or I was in a situation where I was in a back room of a club and there was security who was kind of watching, kind of not. And, he would lift up my dress and put drugs on me and like, okay, do what you want with her. And he would watch or video or take pictures and I couldn't get out. I mean, how does one woman, average size, get away from that? And, I couldn't scream because, the owner of the club is in the room and there's security.
Yeah, you got security watching.
Exactly.
Everything.
There's nothing I could do. And, there were two different types of security, apparently, I learned in that scenario, because the head honcho would definitely not put up with that. I don't know who I was friends with, but I didn't know to report this because I was protecting my husband, because that's what we do in that situation, because it was also very surreal. And then there was the whole, I say 4 days on, 3 days off. 4 days is great. 4 days is flowers and, honey, what are we doing for dinner? It was, it was the normal, let's say. But then there were the other 3 days that were not great. And that is a true abuser. That's someone who knows what they're doing. Some people can do that, and it's almost like you have bipolar, or you have borderline personality, and that's from trauma. But this is something that was done purposely, all of it. And I can see that now because I'm removed, and I've been removed for a few years. And I work with people that specialize in trauma, which is what now I'm aware of, that I want to help people, of course, that have gone through any sort of trauma. And that's a whole situation too, where just like a special needs child, when you see one person that has trauma, you see one person that has trauma, meaning it all looks different. And there's a scale, and it could be anything that's very small to something that's just way out there. And it still one doesn't take away from the other, but they all need to be addressed and healed for the person to live. So, and that's what I'm doing for myself, and that's what I want to do for others going forward. Because I really already am at this point. Yeah.
It's so important. It really is. And I love that people are now coming forward with their stories and saying what happened to them. We don't have to keep it a secret anymore. We don't have to keep it taboo. It happens in probably 3 out of 5 houses.
Well, the statistic now, and we know this because of everything that's going on with that incredible movie, Sounds of Freedom, it's 1 out of 4 households that have some sort of trafficking going on. And the trafficking could be labor. It could be a housekeeper that's not getting paid well. It could be the nail tech down the street that everyone goes to. This person was getting massages, those sort of massages, he finally admitted to. Well, who do we think is doing those massages? Are they doing them because they want to? Absolutely not, So that's a form of trafficking and some, labor trafficking. And I would call it sex trafficking because Lord only knows what goes on in those rooms, of which he tried to get me into. And I no, that was, this is when I started to push back. Yeah.
You're not going to sell me. Like, no, we're not doing this.
Yeah. Well, he did actually. In the end, I found out quite a few things, and yeah, so he did it in the beginning just for his own pleasure. And like I said, there's blackmail out there. There are pictures that were set up, babe, take a sexy picture for me in the bathroom. Do this with your hand, do this, and then we're at someone's house or party and everyone, he's got everybody, he was controlling the situation. So everyone's out of it, right? Or all loopy or whatever it is. And we're being silly. And it's like, oh, okay, I want you to sit in the bathtub and I want you to put the towel over yourself so nobody can see you're wearing clothes. And I'm going to take a picture of you and put his head, like, pretend that you're doing that. Like, it was complete setup. And then it was, okay, let's be intimate together and you get on top of me and you call me this name. It's not my real name, but I want you to call me this name. And I'd be like, what? And it was just, to the point where I was like, no, but he would record me all the time. And even recently said, yeah, I still have that in my safe. I still have that. So
do you think you're on the internet?
It might be, but that's okay. You know why? Because my youngest child is very aware. She figured it all out herself. My older one is starting to understand. Because the behavior that was doing then, he's still doing now. Not with me, but with other people, especially some of the stuff that intoxicates you. And I'll let everyone else try and figure that out. There's definitely financial abuse that's happening still. Things that are even by law he's supposed to be doing that he's not, and then making money in a way that you really shouldn't be making money, and that sort of thing. So I'll let you guys figure that out.
Money illegally.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not gonna say one way or the other just because, but I want to control the narrative because it'll come out, but that's okay because the people that know me, and I'm still that same mom where I have all the kids over and they sleep here. And, I've got, notes on my kids' mirrors or my daughter's mirror. It's, smile, you were loved. I was doing this even when he was torturing me. I'd make him his special breakfast and put a note on it or make hard-boiled eggs and write, smile, you were loved. I love you, have a great day. That's who I am. I go to these parties where everybody's holding the red Solo cup. God bless, and I'd walk in with homemade baked cookies. And they're like, what's that? And I'm like, well, what? If we're going to someone's house, you got to bring something. Not knowing that he's got stuff in the trunk that he's pulling out that he brought as far as party favors. I'm bringing homemade cookies because, I'm the room mom, and not knowing that, it's going to be all about how many of these can we drink? And I don't want to take away from the normal fun because, at a certain point in your age, you can have fun. It's your life. Fine. That's great. But this is a whole twisted ball game. And, it's an obvious one. And, when I left, I flipped it over to the point where I didn't drink for a while and I needed to get control of the situation and myself. And of course, then COVID hit and then everybody was drinking. And then I went into that, I know, right? It was really funny. And I went back to work as a healthcare worker, for the first time in 20 years because I had to. And, that was challenging, very much so. But the funny part is it was right before COVID. So I don't know if I don't want to say that that's funny, but it was like he came back and everybody was drinking, like everybody, all of my patients. So I started doing not only the physical health and all that, I was working on their mental health because we all needed that. But yeah, I went back to work and it was very cathartic because healing people helps ourselves. It heals us. And and that was incredible because I literally was and still am. And it's really helped me a lot in that sense. There's also a fine line for those of us that want to help everyone is that sometimes we just have to look in the mirror and do it for ourselves. caregivers and healthcare workers, we have a tendency to not do that. And again, after being with someone who took as much as he possibly could from me, it's kind of, I'm learning that balance now, ironically, midlife. So.
How did you break it to him that you were leaving?
Oh, I didn't break it to him. So, yeah, well, it was a process because it just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And I think I said the wrong thing to the wrong people, and things got even worse, which is why I'm a little bit incognito right now. And, I mean no harm to anyone. I just want to protect myself. I want to live my life, tell my story, help other people, and make sure my kids are good. I mean, very simple. So I'm just going to put that out there. I don't want to name names. I don't want to do any of that. That's not my goal. So what happened was I ended up, it got to be so bad where I couldn't even sleep in my own bed. And I took my son's extra twin mattress and I put it on the floor of another room, and I was sleeping on the floor for a month. And I had lost about 20 pounds in 3 months, not knowing how, which I later found out. And then I filed for divorce, and that's when things got even more so worse. And he didn't come near me physically. There was no intimacy. There was, slamming the door open. There was going out drinking and putting a hole in the wall, or slamming his hand into a picture of the two of us. And there was my son, who was, I think, 17, 18. He and I would have to, drive through the city and look for his car at the different bars to make sure he didn't drive home way over the top inebriated. It was scary. And I knew I wasn't going to be safe had I stayed. I already wasn't safe, let's be honest, but I knew that it was going to get progressively worse. So I tried to get my kids out, and they wouldn't come. My younger one, she came for a couple of days, but then really was very resentful. And I knew he wouldn't hurt them. But if I had stayed another week, I wouldn't be talking to you. There's no way I would be. Absolutely not. Because there were things running through my body and my system, and I didn't know what they were. Because I couldn't control my emotions. I couldn't control my body. It was very odd. So when I left, I went to a safe house. And within 3 days to a week, I was detoxing from something. I was having withdrawal symptoms. I was shaking. I was cold, and then I was sweating, and, I was craving sugar, which I never eat. And I was just, all these different weird things were happening to me. My brain, I couldn't stop the craziness in my head of what was going on, more so than, our average stress, anxiety, and some of us that do that. It was something that I couldn't control. And I knew that there was something in my system. And the sad part is that I didn't go to a hospital, which as a healthcare worker, I would tell someone to do. But I was afraid if there was something in my body that I didn't know was there, I would never see my child. I would not get half, the custody that I did get. I wouldn't get any sort of rights to see her because she was underage. And I took that chance. Whether it was smart or not, I took the chance. But I was in a house where I was with someone who's a physician. So I knew that if, God forbid, anything had happened to me, I'd be okay. But, this is in the house that I lived in with the person I lived with. There were lots of medications in regards to hormone replacement, steroids. There was, lotions that were hormones. There were lotions that were numbing creams. There was special prescriptions. There were, all that stuff. And I didn't take any of that when I left. And that's, my body was cleansing itself. I just had a feeling that one of those, or not all of them, was coming out. And eventually my family literally wrapped their arms around me, because then they saw what was going on. They saw it. They didn't understand it, but they saw me. I was thin. I was scared. I was frail. I couldn't keep my attention. And that's so not who I am. And then it was, let's get you to a doctor and let's get you drug tested. I had to get tested for STDs because there are two sides of the coin there. Oh yeah, I had to get tested for everything, and I did. And nothing showed up. And then I did research, and there were drugs that I was exposed to, and there's stuff that people have in their drinks when they go to a bar. And it doesn't show up on a test unless you specifically ask for it. GHB is a big one. Ketamine's another one. If you don't ask for those drugs to be tested specifically, they won't show up on your basic drug test. And that's the sad part, because those are the ones that are used. They're liquid, they're powder that dissolves, all of that. And
date rape drugs.
Yeah, exactly. And so, the tracker's in my car. So anything that I found, I gave to my attorney, who still has it.
Trackers in your car?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And my understanding is, in his ex-girlfriend, who he just broke up with last year, there's a tracker that she has in her car. My child knows about it. She's the one that told me. I mean, it's really, you're dealing with someone who's, off the charts. And, I try and find forgiveness in my heart, because that's who I am. And I can do that from far away. I can do that from afar. I can bless and forgive from afar. And, he doesn't come near me. I don't talk to him. I tried to get a restraining order, and they wouldn't do it, even though I told them what's going on in the house, what's in the safe, what's happening, because there's firearms. I couldn't do it. There was nobody to protect me. And that's the sad part. That's the really, really sad part. And so, yeah.
That's the frustrating part. So many women
really
ask for help.
Yep.
And it's like you have to wait for something to happen before someone will help you.
Yep. Exactly. And, then he had the narrative where he called all of my friends and said that I was a drug addict and cheating on him and an alcoholic. And I lived where, if we went out to lunch, we would maybe have a glass of wine or a glass of champagne. The girls did, and that was it. And then you did what you had to do. But, I told that to my daughter, and even then she'd shake her head and that makes no sense. Like, she's in the school, like reading or volunteering, or I was running programs in the school. I was mentoring their children. Like, how could she would say, how could mom do that if she's doing this? Like, you can't function if you're doing that. She was always with us, and it makes no sense. And that's the worst part about it, are how the kids are affected. To me, that's the worst part. And
do they believe you now? Like, are they on your side?
Yeah, and I don't want to. I try not to do the whole side thing, because he is their father, and they've come to their own conclusions. Somebody can't change the way that they are and their behavior, in the sense that I'm still the same mom that I was when they were 5 and 7. And, I'm about to get my youngest to college, and, I'm the same way that I was before the first day of her school, when she went into middle school. I mean, there's no change for me. She wishes that I was a little bit less helicoptery, but she's my little one going to college. I mean, so I'll claim that all day long. And right. And then, the other one calls and he's like, what am I allergic to? And he's a millennial. Like, what? 23 years old. It's like, what am I allergic to? I'm at the doctor's office. What? I'm like, okay, listen, I have 2 ends of the spectrum. I mean, like, seriously, there's no way I could do all those things, because I have to keep it together. Someone's got to. And I always did. It was always me. It was always me, and it will always be me. And I'm okay with that, because, and I promise them that I'll always be there for them my whole life. Whether that's, for another 50 years, or whether it's, I'll always be here for them, and that'll never change. And nobody's going to come in front of that ever again. Nobody at all. So, and I can see that. My older one, my son is, he wants his dad to be his hero. He was sold a bill of goods, and I always say, when somebody's in sales and they're really good at selling and they're really good at their job, they're going to be great in sales in anything. And that's what happened. My dog barking. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
So,
salesmen, they know how to sell you, that's for sure.
they do. Well, that's what I said. I used to say that to him all the time. It's like, don't try and sell me. And that was before whatever happened. You know, so here we are. So as far as leaving, I just decided at one point it was now or never. And I make a joke that we as women, we have like 3 pairs of shoes and 5 jackets in our car. And, we have enough to live out of our car. And, there's always snacks. But I said I would live in my car if I had to, which thankfully I didn't. So, I left and I went to the safe house and I never went back. But what had happened was I had gone out, or we had gone out, and with these friends, some of these friends, and it would be dinner, and the friend would get a drink from the bar outside and come over, and 3 sips later, I'm waking up to my son calling my name, and I'm on the floor of a bathroom, and I don't know how I got there. Or I wake up and I'm at someone's house, and I don't know how I got there. And he would say to me, when he was inebriated, all the secrets would come out. It would be like, don't ever sign the check, and make sure you drink a glass of water in between the drinks. And he doesn't remember that he said these things to me. So to me, that clarified that he set this up. I mean, there was no doubt about it. And that's when when I woke up and I was in someone else's house. And then I realized that my car had been moved from one place to another. I remember there was a tracker in the car, so I knew where I was. And I didn't go anywhere but home. I went to the safe house. And I realized that that was it. There's no way I could go back, because it had really, really gotten scary in the end.
Well, yeah, you're waking up in other people's homes.
Right.
That's
and I don't know. Yeah, it's very frightening. It's extremely frightening. And then it would be, first it would be throwing stuff at me and saying stuff like shame and guilt. And I'd be like, but I don't know what happened. And then he would, the next day, one time I had seen him and he had told me that about the drinks and don't sign the check. And I was like, that's it. And I knew, but it was a validation for me. What had happened was when I left and I was living in the house by myself, like the safe house, and my kids were at our old house, I would go every day before the sun came up and wake up my daughter for school and get her ready and pack her lunch at the other house. I didn't touch anything. I didn't eat anything from the house that I was living in, as far as like where my family was, where my kids were. I didn't want to do that. There were no groceries. If there were groceries, I brought them over. But I took her to school every day. And some nights or some days he'd be coming in while we were leaving for school, like 6:45 in the morning. He would, there was always a state of inebriation. And it was scary, because he would tell me, I'm having people following you, and not knowing it was a tracker, whatever it was. I don't know. But I showed up every day, and I made sure that she was good. I would pick her up from school with a snack, and I would make sure she did her homework. And I mean, I was still that mom, annoying as possible, but I was still that mom, because I wasn't going to change no matter how scared I was. I mean, it was awful. And make sure my son was good and that he needed it. And either I'd make dinner for them and I'd leave because he was coming home, because he was obviously very controlling, but it'd be like, get out of my house. It's like all my stuff was still there. It's like, get out of my house. You're not allowed. And, that's actually not true, by the way, for people. So I would ask him to leave and stay out wherever he went. I don't know. And then I would make dinner and sit with them and have dinner. but still scared to death to be in that space at all. It was horrible. But I always made sure, and within a month and a half of my leaving, I moved into my apartment. I found a job in a field I haven't worked in over 20 years. I had my own money. I mean, I made sure that I had a place to where I could be that was safe and my children could be that was safe. And I did it quickly. There was no way around that.
Good for you.
Yeah, thank you. That was the most important thing. And, yeah, that's how that happened. Yeah.
Well, you knew that it's only going to get worse. I try to say that as much as I can, because people are like, oh, well, he hasn't hit me or he hasn't done this, but trust me, it's coming. Eventually, it always escalates.
Right. And hitting is not the only form of physical abuse. Obviously, sex abuse is physical abuse. But I do, like I said, I have got certain things going on in my body that are broken and bad that need to be fixed. But I can't do that right now because of the cost and because I wouldn't be able to work for a couple of months. It's not always the bruising because, again, people that abuse others physically are really smart. And some of them do it where nobody else could see it or where something can be covered up.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, even if you're grabbed on the inner thigh, when you're in bed and you don't ask for that and it's painful and someone does that to you, that's abuse. That's manipulation and that's abuse. And if you don't say yes, if they don't ask and you don't say yes, and I don't care how long you've been married or you're together, it doesn't matter. Anyone that puts so much force on you where you are bruised in any extent and they're not asking for permission, there's not willing consent, you can ask the experts. That's abuse. And some would call it rape.
Absolutely. I don't care if you're married or not. Yeah. Some people think just because you're married, you can't get raped. And that's a complete lie.
Yeah. Well, tell them to call me because I'll tell them about how I was strangled for fun. And I'd come out of it. I don't know if any of you have passed out and come out of it. I never did until then. And it is scary. It's like free falling. It's like free falling out of I would assume it's like free falling out of an airplane and you're holding on. You're lying flat. Nothing's moving. But the brain, it's like coming out it's like coming alive from being dead. And if somebody's on top of you and, having sex with you still while you're going through that, that's rape. And I don't care how long. I was married for almost 20 years. That's rape. And it wasn't me that said it because I was like, come on. It was just he was being like kinky or he was whatever. He thought I wanted that, because these are his words. And it's all the experts that I've sat across from and talked to. And they were like, you were raped. This was abuse because I let it slide because it didn't look like the average. It didn't have bruises. I didn't have a black eye. I didn't have that like you see on the posters. But when you're sitting at Women in Distress and the person who's doing your intake is an ex-KGB agent who doesn't mess around, all female, and she says this to you, then you believe it. So,
oh yeah, there's so many different forms. Just two abusive homes may look completely different.
Absolutely.
Everyone does their own thing, but you're still being abused.
Right. And there's a wheel, and it's called the power wheel, and it's all about control. And it has nothing to do with anything but that. And so he can't come near me physically. We don't talk on the phone. It's been as long as we've been separated and divorced now. And that'll never happen. Maybe it will, I don't know, but I don't foresee it happening in the near future. And if it does, I will always, I'll always live in grace. So I'll always be cordial. And because what would that do for me is my theory. And what would it do for my children? Nothing. Because I could slam him, but why? But so now that he can't come near me, it's the financial abuse piece. It's, not paying alimony when necessary, or it's, calling it blood money or whatever it is, even though, I stopped working. I had a licensed career And, thankfully I kept that license active because I was able to jumped into it. And I'm going to tell anyone that is like a stay-at-home parent, mom or dad, you've got skills that you have no idea where you could run a small country, because you basically are. And in the workforce, I don't care what software they're doing and all of that nonsense, you've got drive and determination and the ability to live on 3 hours of sleep and still, excel. I'm going to tell you right now, being a stay-at-home parent gets you ready for anything in life. That's my little advertisement right there. But it's true. And it's true. It's true. It's true. I mean, listen, some of the social media stuff or whatever it is, the LinkedIn stuff, you got to learn. But other than that, you know how to show up and do a job. And that's what matters these days. So anyway, I'll give some kudos there because I was scared to death going back. I really was. And I realized once I started that there was nothing I couldn't do. And I was the first one to take initiative in any job I was in any office I was in, because I was used to doing that, and that really helped the skills. So, coming from trauma, it's all manageable. It's not easy. The panic attacks happen, and they're going to happen. But there's a way to manage it. And we all have heard the breathing, the grounding, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 theory. Reach out to me if you need to know them. Music. I've always got AirPods or some sort of headphones in my ears. Either it's a book or your podcast, which I think is fabulous and fun. It is very informative. It's, a YouTube video. It's, somebody in the religious sector that's, doing a sermon, which is kind of cool. It's a motivational speaker or whatever it is. It's somebody singing. It's a great song. It's a book. Especially if you have ruminating thoughts, it's the best way to get out of that, learn something new, and hopefully empower you. Hopefully empower yourself.
I've heard a lot of people saying painting too.
Well, that's the right. So that's the fine, right. So that's the fine art. Painting is really great. Coloring is wonderful. Anything with magic markers, chalk on the sidewalk. I mean, when COVID came, I was scared to death because at this point I'm in my healthcare field and I can't do anything but focus on that one person at a time. And then we were shut down first. And I was like, now what am I going to do? Now I'm sitting here in my room and I don't know, and I'm fresh out of this situation. So I started walking. I ended up walking like 4 times a day and like starting to bike ride like 100 miles. I lost weight more than I gained weight, believe it or not. I was so fit. And that was my anxiety coming out. Sometimes it's for good. It's changed a little bit though, let's be honest. And I started doing that. So I started going to like dollar stores and getting stuff for the kids in the neighborhood. And I would get them chalk and toys, and because I'm that mom. And, I started doing that with them and getting on the ground and just getting into mindless stuff. And it really was great. And figuring, where can I help? And I have a friend that gives out medals to terminally ill children, and they put tags on them. So it's a really great organization. And she was doing it also for like the military and for first responders. And so we made tags to go on the medals, and I would spend hours doing that and make hundreds of them. And it was so beautiful to do because it got me out of my story. It got me out of my physical, tingling panic, anxiety. And it got me into, what's the message that this person might want to hear? What's the message that I want to hear? And that's what I started writing. The world needs you. You are important. You are loved. Smile. All that stuff I was doing for my, former spouse, I was putting out into the world and still am. And I will tell you, anyone who's got stuff going on within them, it really makes that shift for you. It does. And it's very simple. It really is. So yeah, painting is great. I'm horrible at painting. Horrible. that whole like wine and that sipping whatever painting, horrible.
Oh, yes.
I've done that. My daughter's like, what is that? I'm like, I don't know, but look, it's so funny. But, I'd
Painting
rather,
with a twist. That's what it
yeah,
is.
paint. That's it. I mean, and they call them so many different things now, and they're really great. I mean, listen, it's a great like bonding, team building experience. But I'm just bad at painting. But I've got dry erase markers, and I do messages on the mirror for myself and my kids, or just cutting up construction paper and
You cut out.
Gotcha. I'm here. I know what happened. Cutting out construction paper and writing notes and, slapping it on the wall and that sort of thing. And then chanting. Chanting is a big thing. Affirmations we all know, but chanting, Tina Turner. Google it, go on YouTube. Her chanting is phenomenal. She is phenomenal. Always will be. And, God rest her soul. She changed her own life, and in that she changed so many people, and what a role model.
Absolutely. That's what I posted after she passed.
Yeah, absolutely.
She had the strength to stand up.
Oh, for sure. And we all do. And she says that. And I've put some stuff out there where, it's true. What did she do? What was her gift? What's her gift? Her gift was singing and dancing. Well, what's your gift? My gift is talking, obviously, or it's, making other people feel good. One smile at a time. You go outside and who's out there? The guy collecting the grass. Hey, thanks for keeping our neighborhood clean. Here's a bottle of water because it's 1,000 degrees outside or whatever it is, wherever you live, and it's that sort of thing. It's making cut up hearts and with slogans and bringing them to your school, the local schools or preschools or hospitals or whatever it is. There's so much love that you have inside of you that no one can take away. And that's what I always said. No matter who hurt me or betrayed me or abused me or used me or whatever, it's now my body. I get to choose what goes in it. I get to choose who comes near it. And I'm going to be the narrator of my own life. And I'm going to take that pain and I'm going to make it more so that I love that much more. And no one's going to change that. No evil can take it away. What was the saying that he said last night in the movie? And it's a biblical saying, evil will not survive if the good thrive or something like that. Or, I can't remember right now. I apologize, but it's basically like the good in us is so much better than the evil that exists. And I think that, like you said, whether it's painting or coloring, whatever it is, baking, it helps you in that state where you don't know if you're coming or going and you're in panic mode. And, if you do it and then you send it out, it changes the shift. Now you're doing it for love. You're doing it out of love. And then you give it away. And you realize that you have power. Because power doesn't always equal force. Power sometimes is just love. And I think that that's big. I mean, like what you're doing here, Tiff, it's like, it's all love. And that's powerful what you're doing. Yeah.
Thank you. I really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
that.
It's true. And I will say that podcasts are one of the best things you can do for yourself at 4 a.m, because we all wake up at that hour for some reason. Well, it's the witching hour, we could go on that. I can go into that too, but it's really the hour of the full moon and the women dancing, that sort of thing. But 4 a.m, when you're by yourself, it's a little, even if you have a house full, it's what do you do? And you get anxious or you start to remember stuff or you get triggered, you throw on a podcast and listen to whatever somebody else's experience is or something completely different, or realize you're not alone, or reach out to me because I'm usually always up. And, my goal is to be a lighthouse for anybody, because if we're spinning, it's like being in a hot tub or a whirlpool or the ocean, and you don't know which way to look up to save yourself or to get a breath of fresh air. I want to be that breath of fresh air for someone, because I know what that feels like. I lived that for many, many years. And, some days, some moments I still do. And that's when, I grab, my tools in my toolbox. If you have kids, it's Dora the Explorer with her backpack, Such a mom.
Find the map.
Exactly. God, don't get me singing that. Don't sing that. I will not get that out of my head all day long. I'll be like, why am I singing this song? And 3 days later, like, oh, Tiff, right? Yeah, exactly. So funny. It's so funny, but it's true. I mean, we have to have that. We really do.
No, you do. You have to have your own time, your own headspace, and you have to get familiar with yourself again. You have to reintroduce yourself and then
absolutely
build yourself up even better than what you were.
Absolutely. I mean, I definitely am not the same person, the same woman. I mean, just in the tone of my voice, it's very obvious. But I did a ceremony where I took all of the anniversary cards and the pictures that I saved of just he and I, not the family, because I still don't know what to do with those, to be honest. But, and I did a ceremony. I put them in a bowl and I lit that bitch on fire.
Good for you.
I did. And you know what? I said a little prayer, to her. And I make the distinction of her versus me now. And I took the ashes and I buried them. And I thanked her for staying alive for me. I thanked her for all that she went through. And I told her she could rest now. I get really emotional when I say that because she wasn't allowed to sleep and she wasn't allowed to decide what to do with her own body. And she couldn't speak up for herself. And she did whatever she could to survive so that I could live, so that I could tell her story, so that I would be great for my kids because she knew that was what was necessary. And I recommend anyone who's going through anything, any sort of loss or trauma or whatever, or even hope, light the parts that aren't great. Go outside and light it with a, bowl of water, which I had, away from the house, and bury it and say a prayer. And then I wrote after I did, and it's one of my best pieces that I wrote. There's stuff on my website and there's so much more to be had. I have 4 journals that I write in, depending on how I feel is which one I open up. It's really important because it's either the finality of something or it's the beginning of something. And, I'm in a transitional phase that's going to change because my child is moving. I will be an empty nester alone, which I never expected. And then I'm moving from this transitional place I've been in for the last few years that I made a safe house for myself and my kids. And I'm a little sad. I'm very proud. And I'm a little nervous because I'm moving on to the next phase with no direction and no partner. And I never expected that. But I know that I have to do some sort of ceremony. One day it'll be this person that I am now thanking this woman because the next one is going to be surviving and thriving. I never thought I would make it. I never thought I'd make it for my youngest to be 18. When she turned 18 this year, we celebrated for her and we celebrated for me that I made it through because the threats that we get and all of that, I never thought I'd make it. And I did. So those little celebrations are huge. Powerful. I highly recommend them. It is. It's very powerful. And put pen to paper. Get it out. Get it out. Let it go. I love reality. Don't you?
Oh,
Don't
yeah.
you? Yeah. Well,
you're
going to have
you wanted to add about your book? Or do you want to?
Well, we can. I mean, you could say it. I mean, going forward, but my website is the name of the book, but it's also, I'm really proud of it because I did it myself when I was fearful of how to do that. I didn't know. I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? And then the pieces that I'm writing on there and just the desire to help other people. And it's a collection of women coaches that have all gone through different things. One of them is they're all family members, ironically. She was married to somebody who was a severe alcoholic and secretly gay and was married for 30 years until she saved herself. There's another person that went through trauma and then traveled the world and got into the whole energy healing, all of that stuff, yoga, that sort of thing. And there's another gal. Well, then there's my child who shares your name, and but she's going by a different name, and she's starting to her own podcast. She's 18, and she's now openly gay, and we help the LGBTQ community, especially the kids, because whether or not you approve or disapprove of this child is still going through this. These teenagers need to be loved. There's too much suicide going on. So we are on a mission to help as many people as possible because this can all be prevented.
Oh, for sure.
And yeah, and I say, I survived for a reason. I wouldn't have survived. He didn't want me to survive. A lot of people didn't want me to live, to tell the truth, but I did. And, I said it earlier that I stand on the shoulders of all of my strong female ancestors, and they survived even more so worse situations before us. All of the women did. And because of that is why I move forward and why I'm doing this. Yeah.
Good for you. You took your voice back.
Thank you.
You took your power back.
Hell yeah, absolutely. And it was my kid that taught me. She goes and stands in front of school boards and lobbies for kids and their rights and women's rights. We live in a state now where all the rights are being taken away. So guess that one. And it's horrible. And I'm hoping that generation saves us all. So
it would be nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I wear a shirt proudly and it says, I decide. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it's really cool. So, it was great talking to you.
Yes, thank you so much. It was great talking
Thank
to you too.
Thank you so much, and keep doing your cool stuff. I love all your shows. I'm going to keep listening. I promise. Yes. You're welcome.
Oh yeah, for sure. I love it.
Links will be in the show notes. If you know somebody who can relate to this episode, please share it with them. It is so important for people to realize that you're not alone. Thank you guys so much for listening. Don't forget the podcast of the month, which is The Broken System and Quad Pro Quo. All right, you guys, we'll talk crime another time. Bye.